All right. Like always, now I can't promise this is going to be a 30 minutes because there's a lot to say in regards to charge timeouts, believe it or not. So bear with me. Two, um, if you have any questions, please hold those questions until the end of our lesson. All right, what just happened to my printer? Why am I always having? Oh, okay, hold on. All right, no, let's not do that. All right, let me get my screen shared with you guys right quick. All righty. So again, what we're talking about, and the whole purpose of what we're doing here, is to give you an educational perspective toward what it means to be a football official. So we have what you may think it may be, what you see out there, what you may interpret as all we out there is just making coaches' life a living hell, uh, not calling everything we should call. But there is a lot to being an official. We're there to work. We have a job to do, and a lot of officials may not take it seriously. I do. A lot of people, a lot of officials that work with me do. And so we're trying to get everybody on the same page. And on how do I treat what I do here? How do I treat this? And that's what we're here for, to show you how you should treat your job as an official, even when it gets down to timeouts. And if after today's lesson, I want you to start being conscientious about timeouts. If you're watching a game, being very conscientious of what the officials are doing. Are they doing the correct mechanics? Um, are they doing what they're supposed to be doing, or are they just out there checking out? Like always, this is something that we're going to always look at before we get started. Players who practice long hours deserve competent game officials who have a complete understanding of the letter, and that's talking about like what's actually written in the rules, as well as the spirit and intent of the rule, and who administer them consistently and fairly. What do we mean by that? So I had a coach tell ask one of my referees, a hole is a hole, right? A hole is a hole, right? And he kept repeating that slogan, a hole is a hole. The thing is, yes or no. The letter of the law, yes, a hole is a hole. But the spirit and intent of that rule is to prevent uh, the offense to take an advantage over the defense by holding a defensive player and allowing his teammate to get by that player. But if the run is running to the opposite side of the field and there's a simple hole on the right, let's say you run to the right and there's a hole to the left, did it violate the spirit and intent of the rule? No. So yes, by the letter of the rule, it was a hole. But by the spirit and intent of why that rule was created, we don't have to call that hole. Now, real quick, competent game official. What does it take to be a competent game official? Real quick, it takes having the rule book, reading the case book, and actually knowing the mechanics manual. Now, you'll see that this mechanics manual is 2022, 2023. This is the one that we have adopted in PGO. The reason why, when this one came out, the NFHS actually gave the contract over to referee.com. And although it's a decent book, it does not go in detail on each official position and responsibility. So we kind of like stuck in time. I'm hoping that they take back that contract and go back to how they used to write their mechanics manual, because it was detailed and precise. Everything you need to know was in there, unlike the new one. Now, what's the objectives for today's lesson on charge timeouts? One, to review the rules related to the game of charge timeouts, to learn the do's and don'ts as it relates to what teams can and cannot do during a charge timeout, and to learn the correct timeout procedures, i.e. mechanics, as it relates to game officials. All right. So the first handout you looked at was this one right here, the one that he just said I think LaMarcus did not understand. So let's look at the first article. This is Rule 3, Section 5, Article 1. Each team is entitled to 3 charge timeouts during each half. Unused first half timeouts cannot be used in the second half, and unused second timeouts cannot be used in overtime. Very simple. I mean, if that was it, we can go home and we can shut out today, but it's not it. There's a lot more to it. Now, I'm sure when you read this, it was confusing, but I'm gonna show you, like, after I read it, when I'm trying to understand it and I try to go back on it, this is how I read it. 1, after a timeout is used, after a team has used its permissible charge timeouts for a half, any subsequent request shall be denied unless it is for one of the 3: apparent injury, necessary repair equipment, or misapplication or interpretation of the rule, which we call a coach-referee conference. Now, the biggest thing about this in college, I think in the NFL, if a team try to call a timeout when they're out, it's a delay of game 5-yard penalty. In federation rules, we just deny the timeout. And when we get to talk about the importance of keeping track of timeouts, when we get down to mechanics, is it very important to know how many timeouts a team have. Because what we don't want to do when a team is trying to stop the clock for whatever reason, what we don't want to do is give them a timeout they don't have and they get the result they want, was the clock stopping, so they can set up for the next play. Article 4, a successive charge timeouts may be granted during the same dead ball period. Any official timeout may be followed by a charge timeout if it is for a continuance of a coach-referee conference, or is safety involved when a team permissible charge timeouts for have been used, is the captain and coaches should be notified. Now, what are we saying? In college, you can't call successive timeouts, right? So if I call it, like they want to freeze the kicker, if I have 3 timeouts, I only can call 1. But if I try to call another one, it will be denied, or I think it's a foul. I'm not necessarily how college do theirs. But in high school and in youth, a team can use all their timeouts back to back to back before the ball is snapped. And Article 3, a single charge timeout should not exceed 1 minute. The referee should notify teams within 5 seconds after the timeout expires and should mark the ball ready for play. Charge timeout should be reduced in length only if both teams are ready to play prior to the ready for play by the referee. So what that means, let's say the offense call a timeout. Let's say they only call that timeout because they didn't want to get a delay of game. So they call the timeout. The defense moves to their sideline to talk to their coach. The offense, they just call the timeout only for the mere fact so they won't get a delay of game, but now they're ready to go. Well, guess what? The offense now has to wait, and as long as the defense want to take that full timeout, the offense have to wait. They cannot rush the defense only just because they call the timeout. That timeout is 1 minute, and if we only was shortened if the defense come back on the field ready to go. But the defense don't have to rush. Let's say the defense called the timeout and the offense ready to go. They have to wait. So just because you call a timeout and now you're done with your timeout, you can't rush the other team from taking their time out during that timeout. Now, after 5 seconds, after the timeout is ended, the rule says the referee should blow the ready for play in. Now, let's look at those 3, and let's look at how I would look at this. If I was looking at this, this is what I would do. All right. We know they're entitled to 3 timeouts. We know that is permissible uh, that if a team is out of charge timeouts, we're going to just deny them. We're not going to obviously it's not a foul or anything. We know that they can take all their timeouts back to back if they like, and we know that each timeout cannot exceed 1 minute. Okay, so just by understanding timeouts, a charge timeout, they get 3 per half. Once they're out, we deny them. They can use all their timeouts back to back if they want. There's no rule that said they have to wait. And number 3, the timeouts only last 1 minute. Now, so let's go to Article 2. So if you notice, I started Article 1, and then I went to Article 5, and then I worked my way back up. So a charge timeout occurs when the ball is dead. A request of either a player or the head coach designee is legally granted. When a decision for a penalty is pending, a timeout should not be granted to either team until the designated representative makes its choice. So real quick, let's talk about that. Understand, by rule, only one person on the sideline can call a timeout. It's either the head coach or someone the head coach designate to call timeouts. Whoever the coach designate to call timeouts, that's the only one that can call timeouts unless an emergency happens and that coach gets disqualified. Then that permission can be moved to someone else. So this is why, as a wing official, you need to know who can call the timeouts and who cannot. A defensive coach cannot call a timeout unless he was designated to call a timeout. An offensive coach cannot call a timeout unless that offensive coach was designated to timeout. Only one coach on that sideline is able to call a timeout. Now, I've done games where somebody called timeout and we granted it, and the head coach like, well, wait, what? I didn't call that timeout. I didn't want that timeout. And so now you're looking, well, somebody called it, and he goes, it wasn't me. And so now we're looking incompetent. We're looking stupid because we granted a timeout when the head coach did not want it. Now, players on the field, any player on the field doing a dead ball can call a timeout. On the sideline, only one person. And really, what you're supposed to do, if you hear somebody on the sideline call a timeout, you're supposed to identify that person before you grant that timeout. You're not supposed to just quickly get a timeout. You're supposed to be like, is that the one who designated? Yep, that's the one. Timeout. All right? So they may lose a couple of seconds unless they come right in your face and say they want that timeout. You're not supposed to grant a timeout until you know who called that timeout on the sideline. So again, looking at just one thing here, it only can be called during a dead ball. A player on the field or a head coach designee can only call a timeout. So if the coach gives that power, that authority to another coach, that head coach no longer has the authority to call a timeout on that sideline. Most head coaches would be like, I will retain the authority to call the timeouts. So only the head coach on the sideline can call that timeout. No one else. The next one, when decisions on penalties is pending. This is another one that we do not do correctly. The offense had a hole. There was a hole in offense. The coach is upset and he says, I want a timeout. And we quickly give him the timeout. Well, correctly, we put to tell that head coach to hold on. We got to find out what does the offended team or the defense want to do. They want to accept the foul or decline it. Once we find out what the defense want to do, then we grant the timeout. We do not grant a timeout until a decision is made on a foul. So, understand how this works. There's a foul in the play. The coach is upset. I want a timeout. And he proceeded to walk on the field. You say, Coach, stop. Hold on. We have to find out. We can't grant your timeout until we find out what's going to be the result of this foul. Once we find out, then we can grant the timeout. So let's say now we on a timeout, right? We on a timeout. Article 8 of Rule 3, Section 5 says authorized conferences. An authorized conference may be held during a charged timeout. All right. So the question is, what is an authorized conference? Right? What is this? Now, I didn't give these to you because we're going to share them here, but there's only 2 authorized conferences that you can have. And in Rule 2, which is the definition rule, Section C, verse 2, Article 2 said it's the authorized conference. There are 2 types of authorized team conferences. An outside the 9-yard mark conference, where 1 or more team members are and 1 or more coaches directly in front of the team box within 9 yards of the sideline or the top of the numbers. Or B, between the 9-yard marks, 1 coach on the field to confer with no more than 11 players at his team's huddle between the 9-yard mark. So if we look here, these are the 2 types of authorized conferences you can have. Either between the marks, the 9-yard marks, or outside the 9-yard marks. Now, when we look at the yard lines, these yard lines right here are the 9-yard marks. Okay. So basically, really at the top. So if more than 1 coach want to come on the field, they have to stay within this area here. Okay. So they can't be here. They can't come to the hash marks. Nope. They got to be at least 9 yards. Now, what if a field doesn't have the numbers? Well, wing official, you have to guess, right? You'll walk out, let's say 9 yards, and you'll stop. And that's the farthest the coach can go when they're doing outside the 9-yard marks. If they want to be inside, even here, only 1 coach is allowed. Not 2, not 3, not 4. Only 1 coach is allowed when they're in that mark. So, again, we look at this one here. You got multiple play in white. 1 coach come out there between the hash marks numbers. That's fine. Everybody have to remain on the sideline. If you come over here, you want more than 1 coach, more than 1 players, they have to be inside the 9-yard mark. Now, on this one, this is a legal conference. Why? Because there's 11 players. If you count here, there's 11 players in here with the coach. That's illegal. Only 10 players and 11 players and 1 coach is allowed in here. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, whatever on there. Can't have it. They have to go to the 9-yard mark in order to have this conference. Now, the next one is only 1 type of authorized conference may be used during a charged timeout. What does that mean? Well, if you look at this one here, we have 10 players in here with the coach. Let me get my marker. You have 10 players over here with a coach. And then you have one of the players over here with a coach. This is illegal. Okay? Because you can't have 2 of the charged timeouts at one time. You only can have 1. So either everyone's going to be here with 1 coach, or everyone's going to be here. And you'll see coaches, they'll split up. They'll leave their line on the line, and the offensive line coach talk to them. And then some of the players will go over here. That is unauthorized. That's illegal. You can't do it. You only can have either inside the 9-yard marks or outside the 9-yard marks. You can't do both charged timeout conferences in one timeout. Now, what's the foul? let's say they do hold unauthorized conference. So in Section 8 on unsportsmanlike, Rule 9, Section 8 on the unsportsmanlike conduct, we'll see that the penalty is a 15-yard penalty for doing so. This is why we want to stop them, right? Because to do so is an unsportsmanlike conduct foul. So either have more than 11 players in the middle of the field with more than one coach. You'll see coaches timeout and all the coaches want to bum rush the field. Can't do it. We have to stop them and tell them, no, coach, you have to remain outside the 9-yard marks if all you coaches want to come on the field. Now, once they start a charge timeout, they cannot change it. In other words, if one coach goes into the middle of the field, out inside the 9-yard mark to talk to his team, and then some other coaches want to talk, they can't then say, oh, okay, let's all go over here now. Once you started, that's it. You can't bounce from one and the other during the same timeout. But let's say they call a timeout and they're in the middle of the field, and then once that timeout's over, they want to call another timeout, then they can move everybody to the sideline for a outside 9-yard marks because it's their second charge timeout, which they're authorized to do one or the other charge conferences. But they can't do one for 30 seconds and then the other for 30 seconds, right? So what if the coaches want to do inside the 9-yard marks? What about water personnel? Can water personnel come out, or they have to wait until they're outside the 9-yard marks? Well, in that same rule, Section 8, Article 2 says, 3 attendants, none of whom is a coach, may enter the field to attend their teams during a charge timeout. What does it mean? A coach can't take a water bottle from a water personnel who's not a coach and come out there to give them water as though they're a water boy or a water girl or water personnel. All right, can't do it. If they have team moms, or they have young players, young adults, young players out there, or young people out there working doing the water personnel. They could come out with that one coach to give water, but a coach can't hide as a water personnel to bring more than one coach in the middle of the field and say, oh, I'm just giving water. All right, that is illegal. So that's Article 2. And if you see right here, there's a 5-yard penalty to do so. Unless they repeat it, then it becomes a 15-yard penalty. 50-yard foul, right? So in other words, it is a foul for a coach to take the water bottle and come on the field with another coach acting like they're water personnel. All right? Coach, you can't do it. And if they want to ignore you, they want to disrespect you, it's a 5-yard penalty. And if they continue to do that, now we're looking at a 15-yard penalty for unsportsmanlike conduct. All right. Now, this is a one that you will see a lot, and you'll hear coaches talk about a lot. In the note under Section 8, it says, between downs, communication between players and coaches near the sideline are not considered conferences. So if players want to run to if all the players want to run to the sideline to get the play from the coach, you'll hear the other coach saying, is this a timeout? No, coach. The play clock is running. If it's after a play, that team has 40 seconds to get their play and to get the line up for the snap. A huddle does not have to be in the middle of the field. There's no rule saying that the offense have to huddle in between the hash marks. They can huddle on the sideline if they want. Okay? So there's no rule saying that they have to huddle. Why is there marks? Okay. There's no rule saying they have to huddle on the sideline. All right. So just know that that's not a rule, right? So it's not necessary. So don't think just because they run to their sideline that, oh, this must be a timeout. It's not a timeout. It's just they all run to the sideline for some reason to get the play from the coach. Okay. Now, let's talk about coaches' equipment during a timeout. All right. So, electronic equipment, including audio, radio, headsets, mobile phones, devices, if they're inside the 9-yard marks, only the coach is allowed to be on the phone. They use headsets, look at their tablet. The players on them in the middle of the field are inside the 9-yard marks are not allowed to. Only when they're outside the 9-yard marks can they put the headsets on and listen to a coach outside. They're the only ones that can do that, right? So if you look here, the coach outside the 9-yard marks can the player can look at it. That's legal. If they're inside the 9-yard marks, only the coach can look at it. Coach cannot show it to any players. All right. And if they do, it's illegal. And so we see here again, players may use headsets during a sideline conference, but not in the middle of the field. Only the coaches can. And so what if they do? We're going back to Section 8. Using illegal communication equipment as outlined in 153 and 16 is unsportsmanlike conduct. And we see right here, Article A1 through J is a 15-yard penalty, right? So let's talk about our mechanics. Let's talk about us. Now remember, mechanics is a system by which game officials communicate, determines areas of focus, and positions and movement on the football field, right? So before we do, let's recap. Only 3 charge timeouts, right? Once they're out of timeouts, they cannot use we just deny them. They can use all their timeouts if they want in one dead ball period. And each timeout only lasts a minute, right? And we don't rush on a timeout. If one team ready to go, they have to wait. If the other team not ready to go, they wait that whole full timeout. Timeouts are only given during dead balls, obviously, either by a player on the field or by one coach on the sideline that the head coach designated as the one that will call charge timeouts. And we do not give a charge timeout immediately after a foul. We have to figure out what is going to be. Are they going to accept or decline the foul before we give a permission for a timeout? So a coach don't bum rush on the field when there's a foul saying, oh, I want a timeout, before we even find out what we're going to do in regards to that foul. So the next article you received was timeout procedures. This tells everyone what we're supposed to do. This is what we know what to do on the football field during a charge timeout. We just don't make stuff up. We just don't, we just do whatever. There is order of whatever we do on that field. So we're going to really spend more time, the umpire position over the ball. We're going to spend most of our time looking at the wing officials. The first thing is you move to a position halfway between the ball and the sideline to observe the team. We do not stay on the sideline once we call a timeout. We move to the 9-yard mark. And if more than one coach come on the field, we stop them from passing us. Coach, you should always see my back. If I'm on the sideline, if you're in front of me, if you don't see my back, you're wrong. On a timeout, if you're not doing one coach on the inside of 9-yard marks, you should still be seeing my back. If you don't see my back, you're wrong. I might not be in position, and we're going to look at a video here in a second. But we move mechanics, right? We move to a position halfway between the ball, the sideline to observe the teams. So if you look at this diagram, This is where you as a wing official should be, right? You go to the 9-yard mark and you stop. No matter if it's inside the 9-yard marks or outside the 9-yard marks, this is where you go, and this is where you should be positioned on a timeout. Now, be alert for the signal from the referee to give your team 15-second warning. Go to the team huddle and say, Coach, ball will be ready for play in 15 seconds. You have jobs to do. So you move into your position. When the referee says we got 15 seconds, you go to that coach and you have something to say. Coach, you have 15 seconds before they're ready for play. And they really got 20 seconds because the referee going to give them 5 additional seconds after the charge timeout is up. All right? So if you're a wing official, if you perched on the sideline and you just hanging out, you're not doing proper mechanics. All right? You're supposed to be halfway mark, and then you're supposed to, when you get that warning, you're supposed to let that coach know, Coach, you got 15 seconds, and then get them off the field. The next important thing is be alert for substitution by your sideline or attempts to use substitutes for the purpose of deception, and maintain the proper number of players attending the huddle when conference is held between the 9-yard marks. So so areas of focus, right? Part of your mechanics. We talked about communication. You tell the coach. Now we're talking about areas of focus. When they're going in the middle of the field, inside the 9-yard marks, you're counting to make sure there's only 11 players out there. If there's a 12th player going out there, it can't go out there. All right? Now, if more than one coach want to go out there, it can't go out there. But what I really want to focus on this first part here, be alert for substitutions by your sideline in the attempt for the purpose to deceive. Now, let's say we are in this, they're using it outside the 9-yard marks, right? They're coaching, right? You're watching them. It tells you what you look at during the timeout. The referee will remain in his position, and on the offense backfield, the umpire stands over the ball. The linesman and line judge should take positions midway between the ball and their respective sidelines. Now, what you would see a coach do, right? The yellow is the offense. And what you're going to see them do as soon as the timeout is over is they're going to leave one of their players on the sideline, hoping that no one on the defense paid attention. That player may even turn sideways as though they're not on the field. Excuse me for a minute, guys. Come on. Come on back. Come on.
He's definitely hiding now for sure.
I know that's right. Come on. There's always something with these things. Wasn't doing that all day. All right. I rehearse, I go through rehearsals. Let me move it to another screen. There we go. Let me get it back on the slide. Let's see if there we go. All right. So, this is illegal, right? And as wing officials, and we're not gonna really dive into it right now. It's a whole nother topic. But in Rule 7, Section 2, Article 1, after ready for play, each player of A who participate in the previous down or each substitute for A must have been momentarily between the 9-yard marks before the snap. So let me get my trusted laser. What we're saying is this. A player just can't come off the sideline and then go here, right? That's a foul for illegal formation. If a player wants to perch here, they must go in here first and then come back out here. All right. As wing officials, it's your job when you see a player just step on the field, hey man, you need to go in and then come back out. Even on a timeout, all the players must come in and then that player goes back out. You just can't have a timeout on the. It doesn't even matter if they get recognized. Now, the spirit of the rule, the letter of the law said they have to go in and come out. But what if one of the defensive players recognizes that he's over there and then guards him? Well, the intent, the spirit and intent of the rule wasn't really violated because the player did recognize him. But don't let this play go off and this player beats down the field. Sorry about that. This player beats down the field and get an easy pass because he wasn't guarded. That is our fault. We are at mistake. We allowed that touchdown or that big play because we didn't do our job. It should have been a flag as soon as the ball is snapped. Now, inform captains and of coaches of their timeouts remaining. We'll talk about that again. Now, let's talk about all the officials on the field. Referee, umpire, head linesman, line judge, all officials repeat the timeout signal twice. In other words, when a coach calls a timeout, everybody, all the officials on the field are supposed to give a timeout signal twice. Not just the one who calls it, but everyone. We're all going to signal the signal 3, the timeout signal. All right? How many of us do that? All of us supposed to do it. We record the timeout, number of the player who called it, or the coach on the sideline, and the time on the game clock and the period. This is why it's so important that we have data cards. And when we look at the film, you'll see all the referees writing in the book. We are responsible to keep track of all timeouts. We're supposed to keep track of that at all times. Now, number C, stand erect, alert, and erect, right? Timeout is not a timeout for us. It's a timeout for the teams. Yes, we can ask for water, but it's not a time for us to have conversations. It's not a time for us to be goofing off. It's not a time off and any of that stuff. We have a job to do. We're getting paid. You're there to work, not to goof off. Restrict discussions with the captains. In other words, stay out of their huddles. If you got something to say, make it short. You're not part of their timeout. Do not huddle as a group. We're definitely going to talk about that because for some reason, a timeout think we're supposed to have a timeout huddle. We're not supposed to. We're not supposed to huddle. We know your position. Go to your position. Do not come to the center of the field. Confirm the number of remaining timeouts. In other words, blue has 2, red has 3, or white has 3. We confirm with each other because again, what? I might miss one. God knows I have missed timeout. I didn't write it down. Or one of my wing officials missed it. We got to have the correct number of timeouts, and we do that by communicating with one another. Now, I'm going to share another screen with you. Let's see if this is it. Nope, that's not the right screen. Give me a second. Let me find the right stuff. Screen 3. All right, here we go. I think that's it. Let me see. Well, not the right one. Come on, man. Let me see. Let me do this for this. Let me do that. So we're not getting mixed up.
Yeah.
All right. What screen is this? All right, that's it. So this is a game. All right, we see the official come on the middle of the field, and we see them calling timeout for their team. We see them moving to the center of the field, and we see them telling the players how far to go. Stop there, don't go any further. And if you can see, now he's starting to write. He's recording. You can see him and then one to the far side and the referee, they're recording the timeouts, and the umpire is moving to his position. All right. No one is grouping up. No one is huddling. Everybody is doing what their responsibility to do. All right. Almost look like the diagram, doesn't it? All righty. Now, let's look at another one. All right. So we're on the game here. The referee's calling a timeout. The referee down the screen, he's here, he's not here, he don't care. He's just chilling. And we slowly sure see them starting to walk to the middle of the field. Now, what I want you to understand, a timeout is only 1 minute, okay? If you're doing youth games and you got 5 youth games and you start doing this right here, and y'all start huddling together, have y'all little conversations, now that timeout took 2 minutes because y'all lost track of time. Y'all doing what y'all doing. Do not huddle. Again, do not huddle. You're supposed to go to your position and stay in your position. All right. So let's go back to the other one here. Let me get back to the other slide. A couple more things I want to show. All right. So, what we don't want to see is this. All right. The referee over here on the side, chilling, talking. This is most we normally see our referees do. They want to sit on the sideline. They're on timeout. They're chilling. And we see him over here just talking to the coaches, not doing his responsibility, not paying attention to what's going on. And to make it worse, he even turned his back to the field. They're having a conversation, looking at things. All right. I pay attention to stuff like this, and I promise you, you can forget about playoffs. You can forget about championship Super Bowl games. This is not what we're looking for from our officials. All right? This is not what we're looking for. You're getting paid. We expect you to act like you're getting paid, and you're doing your job. Real quick, last thing is be conscientious of what time is on the clock, how many timeouts they have, knowing that the losing coach may want to call a timeout. We got to be aware of these things. Coach, you got 1 timeout remaining. All right. Know that, hey, if he on offense and he's down and it's on, like, you look at this diagram, it's like 7 seconds on the clock, they may want to call a timeout. You got to be ready for that. Not falling asleep. Okay? There's 2 ways to do it.
So what they down by?
Hold on, guys. Coach, hey, after this play, are you if it doesn't work, are you going to want a timeout, or do you want us to or you want to call it? He might say, yeah, as soon as this play is over, I want my timeout. Or no, I'll let you know when I want that timeout. All right. understand that there's two ways to get that timeout. One, if I hear somebody calling timeout, I need to look first to make sure it's the right person calling that timeout. If it's not, I deny it. So you may lose a second or two if I got to turn around and make sure it's you who's calling that timeout. Or two, let me know you want that timeout and I'll make sure you get it. But always look for the coach who's designated on the sideline to call that timeout, because that's the only person that can call it. And we want to make sure that we give it to them and not cause the clock to run out on critical downs or second and fourth period. All right. Now, look how many rules we looked at on charge timeouts. We looked at Rule 1, Rule 2, Rule 3, Rule 7, Rule 8. In the rule book, although Rule 3 is the main crust of the timeouts, just by reading Rule 3, you're not going to know everything you're supposed to know about timeouts. They're all throughout the rule book. That's why you got to be diligent to get into that rule book and get into the mechanics manual, because the rule book tells you the rule. The mechanics manual tells you what you're supposed to do and how to administer that rule correctly. All right. So that is it. Let me stop sharing the screen. All right, guys, that is charge timeouts. LaMarcus Jackson, I know you had a comment when we started. You
Yes, sir.
kind of get it now?
Yes, sir.